When I realized that today I would actually have time to do a video, I decided, because a lot of different topics have been building up online, that maybe I should do a video response instead of what I might want to do. But a video response to what? There's a lot of interesting topics going around. And then I saw a post in the Brigade page on Facebook by Tim Harper about a video put out by Robert the Narrator. And it's part of his, Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master series, episode 9, if I remember correctly. And, well, I thought the reaction that he's going to get among certain members of our community will be pretty predictable. And maybe it's to that I could give a video response and further the conversation a little bit. If you haven't checked out Robert's channel, I've been following it for a while, I think because Tim has shared the links before is how I stumbled across it, and I really enjoy listening to him. So if you haven't heard the clip, this is how it begins.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I am Robert,
Hi, Robert.
the Narrator, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Confessions.
My pleasure.
This will be episode 9, our D&D Grognards, the grognardiest of them all.
In the video, Robert shares his personal experience as a game master, a frustrated game master, someone who enjoys and has enjoyed over his period of time in the hobby reading and trying to play other games. And sometimes his group will go along with that, but they always seem to drift back into Dungeons and Dragons. And as he looks around on the internet and whatnot, he sees this same phenomenon. Dungeons and Dragons players seem to be Dungeons and Dragons players, and then the role-playing gamers seem to be the role-playing gamers, and they doesn't seem to be a lot of overlap. As he describes it in the video, there are people who don't get tired of playing D&D, and there are people who basically don't or won't play D&D. These two camps don't seem to mix. Now, one thing he describes in great detail in the video, but which he doesn't include in his categorizations of people, is the person who will settle for the game that the group wants to play. And some of these people will settle for a long time. Right? They would rather be playing in a different genre or in a different setting or with a different outlook or with a different system or something else. But they keep settling. They keep pushing their ideal game into the background in order to game at all. When I listen to this video, that's really what I'm hearing for Robert. For a very long period of time, he's been the guy to suggest other games, bring other games, persuade the group to have periods of experimentation, and then inexorably they get drawn back to Dungeons and Dragons. Now, he's very clear in the video that he's not slamming Dungeons and Dragons, and it could be any game or style of play that the group gets stuck in and is comfortable in and is satisfied with and doesn't really see the need to move out of. And of course he brings up the term grognard. It's in the title. Now a lot of people will tell you instantly that a grognard is just someone who prefers the older edition to the new edition. The word comes from the French. It refers to Napoleon's immortals, and it really means old soldier, a survivor of long battles, someone with greater experience than you, and someone, of course, maybe that you would want to connect with as a younger person in that same industry. You're a new soldier, and wouldn't it be great to be of some value or interest or be the receiver of wisdom from a grognard? Of course, when that person isn't interested in you and isn't interested in the things that you're interested in, isn't going to attempt the new methods of warfare, whatever they might be, then there can be some friction and maybe some sadness. And bridging the gaps between the new guard and the old guard is something that would be valuable for any army or any hobbyist who would like to understand more about the hobby. So, in Robert's video, he expresses this sense of loss, this sense of frustration. He would like to be able to expand his horizons, and he doesn't know what's holding his group back. Why are they satisfied? How can they be satisfied doing the same old thing the same old way in the same old genre year after year after year? So let's take a look at maybe some of the reasons why. For very good reasons, Dungeons & Dragons, the name Dungeons & Dragons, has become synonymous with role-playing games. And so, whether you are a store owner or someone who's interested in the hobby but have never been exposed to it, or someone who's just walking into their very first game store, even though you're already a player, you don't really know what to look for, you tend to gravitate toward the familiar. Whatever your hobby is, this could be sports or music, you tend to gravitate toward the things you already know, contextualizing your new experience. And so, of course, Dungeons & Dragons is one of those very important games, and it has spillover effects in that anyone who wants to make a reasonable living in the industry will be at least tempted to do some writing for that game, and people who really want to find a game will be expecting to encounter Dungeons & Dragons players. Now, my personal experience is a little bit different from this. Dungeons & Dragons, after I stopped playing it, really disappeared from my radar for a very long period of time, and I suppose that coincides with the sort of renaissance in gaming that is connected to the growth of companies like White Wolf and the games that they were putting out. There was a period of time where D&D simply wasn't that important, where its books just sat on shelves in your friendly local game store, much to the chagrin and worry of the owner. How am I going to move this stuff? Everybody's buying something else. It was a pretty interesting time. Very easy to find people who were interested in playing something else. Everybody had grown up playing D&D, and now they were trying to stretch their muscles. And there's lots of analogies that you can draw. It's like Dungeons & Dragons and role-playing games are ice cream, right? So Dungeons & Dragons would be vanilla. And who doesn't like vanilla? Vanilla is awesome. How many of us can eat vanilla for the rest of our lives? Or, soda pop. Whether you say soda or pop, let's say that beverage is role-playing games. And so root beer is Dungeons & Dragons. How many of us drink root beer all the time? Well, I probably would if I had access to it. But then you take that analogy to its logical extension, because we're not just talking about something simple like that, something that it's very easy to get tired of or bored with. Wives and husbands, spouses. Why stop with just one? So you can see that for some people, Dungeons & Dragons is enough. And it's not really that much of a mystery. Right? For some of us, it's not enough. There is something about it which makes us curious about the next game. How does this other game handle this thing? Or there's something about our interest, and Robert cites this as well, genre and setting. I'm getting to the point where I don't want to run fantasy games or science fiction games or mystery games or horror games or whatever that particular thing is that your group has focused on, to the exclusion of much else. Some of us are going to get tired of it, or some of us never liked it and they just went along with it to play or to have fun with the group or whatever, because there are many different types of gamers. Now, one of our beloved theories is the GNS theory, which of course was replaced by the big model. And why? Well, because on the surface, GNS cites that there are interests among us. And of course, these things get turned into labels. It's not just that there's gamism and that you are a gamist or a simulationist or a narrativist. That's what you are. And that's all that you are. I have labeled you, and so your nature is known, and you can be placed in a box, and we can all stop worrying about what you and your interests are. Except As soon as we do that, people fight to get out of the box or claim that they were never anywhere near any of those labels ever. You are something different and special. However, if you listen to the conversations, the same things come up again and again. Some of us seem inordinately focused on how they interact with the mechanics. Some of us are obsessed with what they can do inside the story and where and how to make that satisfying, have a better story, have a story that's more like a film or more like a book or whatever. How can we satisfy the needs of the players in the story? How do you write your stories? We hear about that an awful lot, and that's that pretty big camp in the middle, the narrativist camp. And then there's the people who are really, really interested in character. Not so much at all interested in the story, but they're interested in what the character can do and being true to that concept of character, almost as if they could simulate being a different person altogether. And so there are those predilections. And of course, there's mishmash and overlap between them. But none of this is role-playing gaming. This is identifying threads in role-playing gaming to which we might be drawn. And some of us might have strong interests in all three of those things with, some kind of different equalizer balance between them. And some of us might be heavily polarized toward one of these directions. And some of us might not. We might be able to be satisfied with whatever comes, or we might settle for whatever comes because of the big model, the actual playing of the game. Now, GNS theory is ignored or derided by a portion of the role-playing game community, and likewise the big model, which grew from it, is as well. This video really isn't about the veracity of the theory or an attempt to prove its utility, but in one sense, one thing that these ideas can help us do is talk about our experience of playing as players. Right? Now, whether or not this is useful for all groups is subject for debate. There are people who've been playing for 30 some odd years. They've been playing in the same campaign, with the same people that they grew up with, and they've never had cause to talk about dissatisfaction. They're happy, and that's awesome. But for those of us who've had lesser experiences or have had a desire to do more, build more, whatever, sometimes it becomes necessary to talk about our feelings. And this is one way to facilitate that, to make it easier to discuss it. So the big model in itself takes the idea of GNS and then recasts that into what do we actually do when we play. So going back to Robert the Narrator's video, we hear very clear descriptions, very identifiable elements that fit within the pattern suggested by the big model. We have a group of people coming together, choosing to play a role-playing game. They decide when and where. They even decide how. Now, how could be complicated, or how can be very, very simple, and that's very, very relevant to this particular video. There are a lot of people out there, mostly D&D players, it turns out, but there are a lot of people out there who will tell you that Dungeons & Dragons is very, very easy to play. It's simple. It's a great beginner game. They'll tell you a lot of great stuff about Dungeons & Dragons. D&D, not current D&D, but a much older form of D&D, was my first game, and I didn't find it particularly challenging to learn how to use the mechanics. I didn't understand the whole game. I don't think anybody that I played with in those days really did. We didn't have enough world experience to really get it. Not at first. But we were interested enough in the game to try and get that experience. And that has made a lot of difference in my life. And going on and learning new systems has been a big part of that, inspired by what I learned from learning how to play Dungeons & Dragons. And everything about how I run games now really stems back to that early experience that I had. Dungeons & Dragons is easy, maybe, from or at a certain time in your life or for a certain type of thinker. D&D is easy, but once you've learned it, you never have to learn it again. And that's the core point here. Once you have become a D&D player, once you have decided to become a DM, then doing those things is much, much easier than learning a new game. And everywhere you go, when you talk about being a role-playing gamer, they might say, you mean D&D? If they're not in the hobby. And so there's this reinforcement that D&D equals gaming. There is its presence in whatever game store you go to, or the sense that, wow, I keep asking people to play Dogs in the Vineyard, but no one even knows what that is. But every time I say, hey, let's play D&D, then I at least get some interest. So it's just easier to play D&D. Now, there are some of us out there who've not had that experience. When we ask people to play Dogs in the Vineyard, we find people to play Dogs in the Vineyard, and we want to go back and play Splicers from Palladium books. Well, we find people to play Splicers, and on it goes. Whatever game it is that you're running, someone who wants to play will show up and play. There is a certain amount of effort that goes into gaming, and either it's put in or it's not put in. Either it's seen as worth it or it's not seen as worth it. And it's not just about the effort. It's not that you're not trying hard enough to meet people to play with, or it's you're not trying hard enough to learn a new game. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that to learn a game requires effort. To meet new people that you don't know and arrange a time to come together in each other's homes to play games on some night of the week, that requires effort. And it's natural in a hobby environment for people to want to achieve what they're looking for with the least amount of effort. And in fact, one of the definitions really of mastery is doing more with less, in a way. Smaller motions with greater effect. And so I see this. I see that people going out and trying to find a game can very easily find a D&D game and have fun. So why not? And people who are trying to find, in a new city or whatever, dealing with strangers, what's the easiest game to get going, right? Are we going to go out there and say, would you like to play Blue Planet with me? If you met a Korean, they might think you misspoke and were asking to play Blue Marble, which is their version of Monopoly. It can lead to confusion, and there's some pretty wacky game names out there, and there are some games which are incredibly complex. Imagine taking, I don't know, Phoenix Command into the office, or heaven forsake, Fatal, and saying, hey, let's play a role-playing game. Whereas if you carried in some version or other of Dungeons & Dragons, at least the name recognition can spark the conversation. So effort, the amount of effort. And then it's, how can people be satisfied playing the same game forever? Well, I think asking the question and turning it around and making it a statement answers the question. Some people can be satisfied playing the same game forever, and it's not a problem to be fixed. But the problem to be fixed is, how can I find a way to play the way I want to play? If my old group has found their comfort zone, but I'm still looking for the boundaries of mine, is it worth it to me to continue on beyond that group? For some of us, it's playing with the group that makes up our big model of play, our creative agenda that's pinning together all the things that we actually do at the table, all the changes of schedules, all the agreements about topics, all the excitement about genre, all of the things that make role-playing what it is to us. Part of that is just doing those things with your friends. Some of us can comfortably play with gamers, strangers, all the time. Go online and hangouts and just say, hey, who wants to play at this time, on this day? And don't care who shows up. And some of those people become your friends, and some of those people become people that you game with, and some of those people you never see again, and it's enough. But for some of us, we want to game with those people. And who are you as a person? It doesn't have to be the game. It doesn't have to be Grognardism, but it certainly can be a factor of effort. It can be a factor of why we play and who we want to play with. It can be a factor of just wanting to play. I just want to play. I don't care what it is. I just want to escape for a while. Or I want to see if I can take class X and get it to level Y. It can be about what cool skills can I rationalize, learning in this character. What level of initiation can I get in a cult, in a RuneQuest game? There are lots and lots of things that can drive interest, and they can continue to drive interest for a very long time. Are D&D players, and the Grognards among them, the Grognardiest, are they the most intractable, the most unwilling to try new systems? I'm going to come out and say I don't think so. I think that among players, maybe they have the least need to be accommodating. They can always find people to play D&D. But the rest of us, those of us who choose to spend our hobby time on other games, we have a harder time trying to find the right size group and the right mix of personalities to get off the ground and get good exposure and good system mastery with some other game. And there's a lot of compromise, a lot of give and take that goes in achieving that. And so, with that need, that desire pushing us, the effort to do so becomes worthwhile. But if you're happy playing D&D, these are muscles that you don't necessarily need. All right, those are my 2 cents on the topic. Another good video from Robert. If you haven't watched it, please go and do so.